Inflammation, that's what I got. You turn the heat on me, some like it hot.
Call out the engine, ring up the station, I'm on the spot.
Introducing a classic patty melt with a spicy twist.
Like it all night.
So my name is Jerry Croft. I'm a professor, psych prof in California, and this talk is about propaganda. And I would like the psychology of propaganda. And I'd like you to look at a set of photographs. This is from the 50s. And just store your emotional reactions. What are your emotional reactions to what you see? Why we have the youngest customers in the business. Nothing does it like 7-Up. Coca-Cola was not to be outdone. For a better start in life, start cola earlier. How soon is too soon? And here's Santa Claus urging you to give cigarettes, Lucky Strikes, to your friends for Christmas. And there's a doctor who, in the small print, it says he works hard and you can trust him. And more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. That's pretty close to a recommendation, isn't it? And don't worry, darling, you didn't burn the beer. At least you can drink Schlitz when your wife can't even cook. Oh, and down at the bottom, you mean a woman can open up a bottle of ketchup? Wow, how did they get so smart? So you think that in the past, oh my God, people were living in a trance. They were brainwashed. I mean, here you're giving poisons to your friends for Christmas. Doctors are recommending that you ingest something in your lungs that causes lung cancer. Women are demeaned. There's no sense of emancipation of women at all. It's and they're giving sugar water. This has over 10 teaspoons of sugar to a little 4-month-old baby. And you think, my God, those people were crazy. Well, the purpose of today's talk is a controversial idea that we are just as much in a trance and hypnotized by the media as the generation of our parents and grandparents who watched those Mad Men commercials. Things are not any better for us. We are not more liberated and more aware of the world. We're just as much victimized by it. So this talk comes from a book I wrote called Duped: Delusion, Denial, and the End of the American Dream. Now, all the references for this talk are in that book, so I'm not going to give you references here. But let's talk about some statistics about our current lives. Kids spend currently 45 hours per week in screen time. That means TV, internet, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's a lot of time. The average American now spends 9 hours per day using the media. 50% of American children from 8 to 18 report that the TV is on in their home constantly. So we are really glued to, some people say outside of sleep, work, that's the majority of what we do, screen time. We're glued to our screens. So the question is, are we getting dumber? For example, over 90% of fourth graders could not identify a photograph of Abraham Lincoln. Not too impressive. 75% of 17-year-olds could not identify who was the head of Germany in World War II. 30% of high school students did not know how long it took the Earth to orbit the sun. Half of U.S. fourth graders did not know the meaning of the word puzzle. So you can say, well, the media is really dumbing people down and we're getting less and less educated. But I'd like to give you a contrary position, okay? 75% of 17-year-olds knew what city was in the zip code 90210. Well, that's pretty good. That's pretty smart. isn't it? They know what city that zip code is in. Now, they know that because there was a television program called 90210. But 96% of American school children can identify Ronald McDonald. It's as if we're living in a playhouse, which is the media-created fantasy world that we spend 9 hours a day doing. And we know everything about that playhouse. We know who Kim Kardashian is, but we don't know who Scott Carpenter is. We've substituted our fantasy reality for real reality, if you want to put it that way. So I'm not so sure we are dumbing down as much as the fact that we are living increasingly in the trance without knowing it. So the propaganda tools that we're going to talk about that keep us in this fog: reframing, repeated affirmations, vicarious and imitative learning, distraction and denial, classical and operant conditioning. So get ready, because we're now engaged in the process of media literacy, which means we're pulling off the veil of propaganda and clearing out the fog and starting to see what's really going on with the mass media and us and our consciousness. I'm going to start with the easiest one first, reframing, okay? In 1984, George Orwell writes a book called 1984, and there's a whole propaganda ministry in his fictional book that writes propaganda and that rewrites, makes bad things sound good, makes garbage smell like perfume with the right language. And the language was called Newspeak. Okay? So here, and it's basically reframing, putting nice words on bad things. George Bush was not the greatest environmental president of American history. He cut gasoline mileage requirements. He cut rules and regulations on diesel emissions. He weakened rules protecting rivers from pollution. He allowed more nitrogen oxide, mercury, and sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. So if we went to a guy and said, how do you feel about more sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere? Guy on the street says, well, I don't think that's very good. I think that isn't that called smog? Well, what do you think about more mercury in the atmosphere? Well, I think that's bad for your brain, isn't it? I don't think I support that. Okay, so we're going to, what is the name for the legislation that George Bush introduced that weakened all of these regulations? Well, here comes Newspeak. It was called the Clear Skies Act and the Clean Water Act. Really? Really? Well, how do you feel about the Clear Skies Act? Oh, I think I like clear skies. I would support that. How do you feel about the Clean Water Act? I'm definitely in favor of clean water, absolutely. Okay, so there's reframing for you. It gets worse. In the last 20 years, 55,000 American factories have closed, fired their workers, moved to China, to Vietnam, to Indonesia, to the Dominican Republic. They say that 6 million jobs were permanently lost due to this process. Chinese workers make our toys and make virtually everything sold in Walmart, and they get paid $3 an hour. In Bangladesh, women are making clothes that are sold in Target and JCPenney. They earn $36 a month. That's about 25 cents an hour for that shirt that you bought at JCPenney. Now, Detroit is a very good example of this process. We don't have a name for it yet. In Detroit, in 1960, Detroit was an incredibly vibrant city. They had 290,000 manufacturing jobs. Today, there are 27,000 manufacturing. 90% of the manufacturing jobs left Detroit. That's a picture of the General Motors building, okay? Empty, windows broken, all right? But there's a brand new Ford factory, state-of-the-art, beautiful, makes 250,000 Ford Focuses every year. But guess where it's located? It's located in Hermosillo, Mexico. And they make 250,000 Fords there and send them to the United States duty-free. Detroiters don't like that. The average wage paid to those workers in that factory is $3 an hour. Now, I ask audiences, oh, how many of you have ever worked for $3 an hour? Most everybody doesn't even raise their hand. Senior citizens will say, I once worked for $3 an hour in the 1950s. Well, this is 2013, and that's where Fords are made today. And the result is, it's not that General Motors was making gas guzzlers. It's partly true, but 90% of Detroit's good jobs left. And Detroit closed 50% of its schools, okay? It currently is in bankruptcy. That's a picture of a great, famous Detroit movie theater. Frank Sinatra played there once. So what do you call this? Detroiters don't like what happened, okay? But this is the name given for this process. It's called globalization, and it's called free trade. So what do you think about globalization? Oh, I think I like globalization. That sounds modern. That sounds international. I think I support globalization. How do you feel about free trade? Oh, I'm in favor of free trade. I like anything that's free, you know. I think that's a good thing. And so, bad things are made to sound sweet and nice with reframing. Here's a little video on this subject.
Put it, euphemistic language that conceals reality.
Poor people used to live in slums. Now the economically disadvantaged occupy substandard housing in the inner cities. And they're broke. They're broke. They don't have a negative cash flow position. They're broke.
And today, America's love affair with semantics has given birth to a new phrase to describe the rich.
Job creators in America basically are on strike.
Increasing taxes on job creators. This administration and this president, policies are hostile to job creators.
Instead of just saying the wealthy who make over $250,000 a year, if you say job creator, then you say, well, we can't raise their taxes. They're the ones who create jobs. When in reality, when their taxes were higher under Bill Clinton, 3 times as many jobs were created.
The propensity to add softer terms to the English lexicon has surged over the decades, particularly when it comes to military-related language.
Damaging euphemisms, like when, instead of saying innocent civilians were killed, in a drone strike, you say there was collateral damage. Collateral damage, which to me is the worst expression. No, it's innocent men, women, and children were killed. And the collateral damage sounds like a real estate transaction.
Allied soldiers shooting each other has become known as
Friendly fire.
kidnapping, and transferring a terrorist suspect is called
Extraordinary rendition.
and the torture America's war prisoners might endure is referred to as
Enhanced interrogation.
Now we're going to start propaganda technique number 2. And this sort of builds on itself, but I want to warn you about something. The purpose of propaganda is ultimately to make you feel better about something, about garbage, about killing, about whatever. So as we take off the veils of propaganda and become more media literate, we're starting to look at things that are a little harder to look at. This is really not an entertaining lecture. We're no pain, no gain here. As we become more conscious of the propaganda in our lives, we have to confront things that propaganda protects us from. Propaganda is kind of like a bandage, and we're pulling that bandage off, so fasten your seatbelts. Repeated affirmations is essentially this. I'm going to try to tell you that 2 plus 2 is 5, and how am I going to convince you of that? Well, let's say I got Stephen Hawking to talk in his way, in a muffled tone, about the new mathematics which allows 2 plus 2 to be 5. And then I got a Nobel Prize winner who said, yes, there are conditions under which 2 plus 2 could be 5. And then another speaker and another speaker. And pretty soon it's repeated so much that you start to believe that maybe 2 plus 2 is 5 or could be 5. That's what repeated affirmations is. Say the lie over and over again with authority figures, and it starts to be believed. Here's Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister of Nazi Germany. Propaganda must therefore always be essential and repetitious. It must confine itself to a few points and repeat them over and over. Okay, thank you, Mr. Goebbels. Now, George Bush said almost exactly the same thing. See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over to kind of catapult the propaganda. Well, that's exactly what happened with Iraq. But before we talk about Iraq, I need to introduce a psychological term, a delusion. So imagine there's a guy who has a cat, and he sees that his cat went over to his neighbor's house, and the neighbor is feeding his cat.